Alright, welcome to the Backyard Professor Chess videos. Let's do some more chessercising. When we chessercise, we're like Bruce Lee, right? We practice the punch 1,000 times a day. Boom, boom. Chessercising is the exercising of our minds. These are the push-ups of our chess. So there is some repetition, but there is also newness even as we repeat the basic information, because we want to drill this in our heads to where it becomes a natural part of our game. It just flows. Be like water, my friend. I'm going to be like water and push pawn king 4. Yeah, whatever. Oh man, now I lost my spot just as I was getting going here. Oh no, that's not it either. Crud, so much like being like water, like a waterfall, I fell off the rock. Ha! Pawn king 4, pawn king 4. Okay. In Fred Reinfeld's complete chess course, I happened to find the single volume edition that is 8 books in one, 700 pages of chess instruction. This thing first came out in 1953, interestingly enough. It's kind of fun to see the historical perspective of chess from the old days to today, all of the similarities and the discussions. For the first entire part of his book, Reinfeld is talking about one of the most important of Jeremy Silman's imbalances. So I was really excited to read through the first part of this course and find this excellent instruction. This will be a repeat of information with new examples showing us that these fundamental laws of chess need to be put into our games. He's showing a basic opening here. Now, the problem here, Black has done okay until he pushes this bishop pawn. Now we're going to learn tonight that no matter what, if you're Black, you will never push this bishop pawn like this in an opening, ever. This puts Black behind in development. Now, development, it's a temporary imbalance. If you start fiddling around, being like the Bob Ross, you know, the guy that painted those happy little trees and those happy little streams in the happy little field. If you're going to Bob Rossify your game and let your happy little pawns go for happy little strolls up and down the board, and you're going to waste their moves, but at least they're going to be happy little pawns in a happy little chess game, you're going to get happily trounced. We don't want to Bob Ross our chess games, right? We want to be happy chess players who win the game. That's what we want to be, right? This is a lousy move. Number one, it opens up the king too early for a possible attack. Number two, it doesn't develop anything. It doesn't help him prepare to castle, which is what you want to do as a general rule, say within the first 10 moves or so, right? If you leave your king in the center, you're going to get attacked. That's just the law of chess. Anybody who's played for a while recognizes that. Leaving a king in the center is an invitation. Come and get me. And if your opponent knows what he's doing, he's going to come and get you. This also obstructs the knight's natural move there. This would have been vastly superior to the move he made. At least this helps him prepare to castle. It also hits e4 and d5. This does nothing. It's a waste of time, right? So don't do that move. That's a horrible move. And you say, yeah, well, White moves his knight twice, and he puts it over here on the rim, and the knight on the rim is dim, right? Or as Bill Roberti in his book on tactics that I just finished, a good little primer book on tactics, a knight on the rim spells trim. You trim down his influence. But what is he doing? He's preparing another developing move because Black has made a faulty opening here. And I'll show you. And now, of course, Black really flubs up. He's so nervous about that knight coming after him that he seeks to chase him away. And of course, he's blown his kingside cover. This is a bad way to play chess. It doesn't develop any of the powers etc. This particular part of the discussion is on the power of development. It's a temporary imbalance. It's such an important imbalance in the Silman system. It's also an important imbalance. He doesn't call it an imbalance, but Reinfeld uses the entire first section of his chess course discussing the vital importance of development. Now he thought, he came up and went check to the king with the queen, right? So the king comes up to king 2, and of course, the knight now goes bishop 5, checkmate. Just that fast. Now look at the chessboard. This is a quick miniature to introduce the theme of the importance of development. If you get too far behind in development, you can get whooped. Count them. 1, 2, 3 powers. Count them. 1. 3 to 1 odds. In a football game, if you were allowed 3 times as many players as the opposing team, I predict you would have a much greater chance of winning that football game. Wouldn't you? Truly? Seriously? Honest. The idea is development. Let me show you another theme on this. Now, a more in-depth look at the idea of excellent development is given by Reinfeld. This book came out in 1953. It went through several editions all the way through 59, and then it stopped. I suspect Reinfeld was either too old or he died about then. I'm not quite sure about his personal history. I know he was in the era just post-Alekin. This was during the era of Botvinnik and Petrosian and some of those guys, the big boys. Bishop comes up to knight 5. We have a classic Ruy Lopez here. And he brings out his knight to bishop 3, which is perfectly acceptable. And now white castles. A very good thing to do. And now the knight takes the pawn. And there's nothing wrong with that. Pawn to queen 4. They've learned in the Ruy Lopez that if you're going to keep the initiative as white, rather than coming up and threatening the knight, you keep the initiative even more strongly by pushing that pawn twice. Just a nice little thing for you to know. And now the knight, the knight bombs down here to knight queen 3. And now this bishop takes this knight, and the bishop pawn, or the knight pawn I should say, takes the bishop. So now we've got the doubling of the pawns. And now the pawn takes the pawn, threatening the knight. And now the knight comes down here to knight 2. And Reinfeld is using this as an illustration of how not to use an opening and not to proceed with your development. This is a horrible square for the knight. 5 moves into the game, and all black has to show for it is one knight on a very, very lousy square. So he's severely criticizing this. He's using this as an example. This knight comes up to queen 4, and you say, yeah, well, white's starting to use his knight an awful lot too, and that is true at this point. And now bishop b1. He got threatened, and now he goes back to b1. He's using this as an illustration. Black has wasted too many moves, and he virtually has very little to show for it. Well, white doesn't have a lot to crow about, but he does have an open field with central files. That's a lot more than black has. He's castled also. And this makes a difference. He's showing the theme of development and its vital importance. And now you're beginning to see it, aren't you? Rook straight across from the king, and he can push this central pawn. This is getting very serious very fast. Pawn knight 3, virtual waste of time, because now the knight comes over here to queen 6, check. Is that a great move or what? He's taking it right to him, isn't he? Well, the bishop takes the knight. He doesn't want to obscure his pawn structure, and now you can see what's going to happen. Is this pawn takes the bishop, but because of white's superior development, it's a discovered check to the king. And now he's got a really wicked pawn here that can really do some interesting stuff. Well, the king dodges out a check, and now, of course, the bishop comes zipping up here because the field is open, because he's gotten rid of his central pawns, and because he's had very good development. He now develops with tempo and checks the king again. This is not a long-lasting game for black, is it? And now queen simply comes up to queen, queen 4. And of course, at this point, he's threatening mate. So he comes up to pawn bishop 3. Oh, and then the queen drops off the edge of the earth, bangs her head, and says, ouch, put me back. She comes over here to bishop 4, checkmate to the king. Again, the theme is, when you have a superior development, 1, 2, 3 pieces. Granted, it's not the whole army like I rant and rave about. I understand this. But 3 as opposed to 1 mere knight who never got to play in the game again after making an initial 5 moves. And he's got a very powerful pawn here, which I'm going to count as another power. So he's got 4 powers here to 1. Which doesn't amount to anything. You can see that the serious implication of this temporary imbalance is that when you find yourself better developed than your opponent, you ought to try to find ways to play aggressively, to play fast, to play dynamically. You don't want to play passive defensive moves. You don't want to push a lot of pawns. There's no point. There's much greater power in your powers, even though he did push this pawn a lot, because it was on an open file that he took care of. And it certainly contributed to this particular checkmate, right? I've got another one I want to show you. See, because we're Chessercising and we're learning more about the importance of this temporary imbalance called development, we're becoming happy little chess players, like Bob Ross was a happy little artist, right? I'm not knocking his art. He was fabulous. I've used some of his books in my own oil paintings. Bob Ross was excellent. It's just that his happy little stuff made you laugh like crazy. So we're going to play another little happy chess game. And show you the happiness of finding the imbalances and using them when they're positive for us. Right? Watch how this works yet again in another game. Pawn, king 4, pawn, king 4. Knight, queen, bishop 3, knight, queen, bishop 3. Will the real pawn stand up? Pawn, bishop 4, and now bishop. Bishop 4, and now knight comes up to bishop 3. And we have pawn, queen 3. Now, so far, both players are doing pretty darn good in this opening, aren't they? They're getting their pieces out. They're preparing to castle. They've got great central tension. They're not going to just let the center go to one or the other. So far, this opening's a pretty good opening, right? Now, white should continue with his development, following Reinfeld's idea. But what does white do instead? He presses pawn to the bishop 5. He says this is a waste of time. Knight to bishop 3. Black has the right idea. He's equalized. In fact, he's going to surpass white. Pawn to king rook 3, and he's got a question mark on this. Now, I want to explain something. This is not a bad move. It's just being done too early. You know? What it does, the idea is to limit that black knight. It's the Steinitz rule. Limit the knight and his influence. In this instance, though, because of black's development and his superiority in development at this point, this really isn't necessary. It's more of a waste of time, right? When he pushes the pawn to queen 4, when, as a general rule, when you see your opponent beginning to go on the wings, doesn't matter. If he'd have pushed this pawn up to here, or this pawn up to here, trying to chase the bishop away, whatever he's doing, if you see your opponent begin to work on the wings, if the center is not locked, the proper response is development in the center. That always wins. There's another bit of knowledge of power for you in your chess games. Right? Notice, he pushed that pawn to queen 4. This is beautiful how this works. Now, knight takes the king pawn. And he's got a question mark here. He says, no way. That's the wrong approach altogether. Now, the knight takes the pawn instead of the knight take the knight. Black has outplayed white here because he has the superior development. He took the pawn. Now watch what this sets up. This is really quite instructive because what's he looking at? We're going to Chessercise, right? That means look at the board for the imbalances, right? That means look at the board for the options. We're learning how to read the chessboards. The imbalance of development is now in Black's favor. Black has equalized, and in fact, he's past equalization. He's gaining the initiative. Look at what the threat is. The reason he came to here, took a pawn, is because he's got the queen to rook 5 check, and black and white is in deep trouble here. See how that works? It's very fun to see this. He says white's already lost. He says the knight came back down to bishop 3 to try to act as some sort of a guardian and to dissuade black from bringing the queen to the rook 5. Right? Dropping the knight back down covers that square. So, well, your option is basically out going to queen rook 5. So what do you think black's going to do then? He's got the superior development. He hasn't castled yet. That might be a good option, and then if he moves his rook over, he's got that open file straight across from the king. The white king's not going to castle just yet either, right? So as we begin to look at the board and analyze, you know, quite frankly, he can bring his bishop out and take that pawn and just absolutely have a complete overwhelming development position, absolute ironclad control of the center. That would not be a bad move, would it? I mean, that would give white very little to show for any kind of development. He would be completely overrun. So what does black do? Black goes queen to rook 5 anyway. And you go, really? For real? That didn't dissuade him? He's going to give him his queen? Yes, he's going to give him his queen. Black is ahead in development. This is his imbalance in this game. He's going to make sure he stays ahead in development because that's going to give him the initiative. He's got the power at this point. So he's going to keep going. It's worth it to him, he's worked out the calculations, to go ahead and make this move anyway. What does this do? Here's what is so interesting. Well, the knight takes the queen. Duh. That knight is a happy little knight. That knight has been trotting all over the chessboard, and now he nabbed him the queen, the most powerful black piece. But it takes him right out of the game. In a game where white has the inferior development, and black is absolutely dominating this game right now. The attack is on. And you go, attack? All he has is a bunch of minor pieces out there. That's right. All he has is a bunch of minor pieces out there. He drops his bishop down and goes, check. And he forks the knight to boot. And you go, oh, Well, that's pretty good. However, the king can get out of check. Centralization with superior development, eliminating white's ability to castle because he is behind in development, gives black all of the play. Look at those central knights. Right in the heart. Check to the king. King comes up to queen 3. And knight comes back here to bishop 4. Checkmate. That's fantastic, isn't it? Superior development is a temporary imbalance. You have to play dynamically. You have to get your pieces out. You have to attack the king right now. Because he had superior development way more than white did. He simply trounced white. That's Jeremy Silman's chess style. It's really cool to see that it was also Reinfeld's chess course opening concept. For the first 50 pages of his chess course, after he taught you the basic moves, he jumped right on to the importance of superior development and what to do with it. This is sensational instruction. But wait, there's more. If you'll keep watching, I'll show you another one. Kind of like that TV commercial. But wait, there's more. For another mere $1.99, we'll throw in the second chessboard for free. Hang on. Now, Reinfeld has about 10 illustrative games on this theme of development. I'm only going to show you a few more. This one is particularly excellent, though, as an illustration. I really like how he shows this theme so powerfully in this particular example. Knight, queen, bishop 3. We've got a typical guaco piano here. Bishop b4, bishop b4. Oh, I played it wrong already. Pawn, queen 4, pawn takes pawn. Okay, now white castles. Come on, castle white. And then pawn to queen 3. Now you can see that they're doing a pretty good development, right? And now pawn bishop 3, he's going to challenge the center. And then the bishop comes up here to knight 5 to put the question to the knight. Now, they're opening really well in a typical guaco piano. There's beginning to be a little tension and battle, and who is the best developed? Right now it's pretty even. Who is the best central power? Right now it's still question. You know, they're still fighting this out. So this is a pretty good jump in the game. And now the queen comes to the queen side. Queen knight 3. Very interesting. Now the bishop takes the knight. There's no longer a pin, so there's no longer any point to that. And the bishop comes up here, pow! He hits the weakest square in black's camp, which is the f7. Check. Already. He's already hitting him. And you go, really? Is that wise? Well, let's check this out. Pawn takes bishop, check. King comes to bishop 1. And now the bishop takes the knight. And of course, the rook takes the bishop. Right? So he can't castle. And now the pawn takes the bishop. Here. So he's disrupted the white king side. Black can't castle, and he really doesn't have a lot of cover. So this game is getting interesting fast. You can see the queen has a screaming diagonal power through here, right? Black is penetrating in the center pretty good. Nobody's really on open files yet, but the possibility exists for open files, doesn't it? So this is really, really interesting. And now what's what black does? Pawn comes to king knight 4. And you're going, really? But he's not really in any danger at this point, so he's trying to build more space, is what he's doing. Well, the queen's going to come up here to king 6, and she's basically dominating the position, isn't she? This is pretty good. Now the knight comes up here to king 4. You notice he's centralizing. They're both attempting to get the initiative. They're both attempting to have the biggest possible chunk of real estate. And now the queen bobs down here to bishop 5 and goes check, right? King comes over here to knight 2. Isn't that fascinating? Now, here's the thing to notice. Black isn't necessarily overly concerned right now about that white queen being so close. Why? He's not going to get checkmated in this position. It's only a one-piece attack at this point, right? So he's going to try to artificially castle and get behind some cover. He's going to pull his knight back over here and cover his king. He's got his queen to come on over. So he's not technically in any super real danger because white hasn't developed the rest of his army either, right? You can see that. White takes the moment to put his king to king rook 1, and black does the same thing. He's dodging his king back down out of the way, but watch out. Rook grabs the open file. Development, right? King's out of the way, tucked away safely. Now he's got a file. Of course, the pawn is in his way, but the open file is for white because his pawn does not obstruct his rook. See how that works? So now queen's got an open file, got a diagonal, and the rook has an open file, although this rook is trying to guard it. The game has increased intenseness quick. This is very interesting. Pawn continues onto knight 5. That's very interesting, isn't it? He's not going to give that open file to white. That's fun. He's blocking it at this point. That's correct strategy so far as black can do at this point. That's not bad. That's really kind of odd, but it's really kind of fun. Pawn comes up to king bishop 4 to put the question to the knight. Watch what the knight does. Bishop 6. What a spectacular outpost. Isn't that fascinating? Threatening the rook. So this is quite the game, man. They're really vying back and forth for things. Well, the rook takes the pawn. Now this is interesting. He's going to take away the basis of the outpost, and he's going to put the question to the rook. Who gets the file, right? You never want to just let your opponent have the file if you can help it. Queen comes up to rook 5. This is seriously tense. Is that not interesting? How each one is fighting so hard for the initiative. This is absolutely awesome. He's threatening mate. You see that? Rook drops back down to knight 2. Queen takes the rook pawn check. Wow. You're going, really? Rook takes the queen. And now the rook uses the file to drop down and go checkmate. Isn't that a wildly spectacular game? Because each one attempted to do the maximum development. Notice the difference here. Notice the difference here. There was too many moves on white's part by the same pieces that have already developed. The entire queen side of the army stayed home. Half of white's army stayed out of this battle. The queen is the strongest piece, make no mistake about it, but she can't do it alone. She cannot do it alone because black had the superior development of more powers. He only left the rook home. He left the rook, the knight, and the bishop home. And that made the difference. Look at the pieces involved. The bishop, the knight, and the rook. Those are the pieces that checkmated the king. So this is a great series of illustrations on the important temporary imbalance of development. If you're playing along and you're in the 5th or 6th move, and it all of a sudden dawns on you, whoa, wait a minute, my opponent has 3 of his powers out and I only have 1. Stop moving pawns and get off your butt and get your army to work. That'd be my serious advice at this point. We need the whole army in there coordinated in a good effort to get that king. One piece alone cannot win the game. But the army, in coordinated, developed fashion, can win the game. So there's your Chessercises for the day. Thanks for watching my Backyard Professor Chess videos. Happy checkmating and happy Chessercising. Make your pawns and your knights and your bishops happy pawns, knights, and bishops. And I will see you in the next video.